Good news and bad news for the Chicago Bears on the injury front, where rookie wide receiver Luther Burden is back just in time, but the injuries are starting to mount on the defensive line that could have some real impacts on what this 53-man roster looks like.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. On the show today, I want to catch up on some Bears injury news at training camp. Some good news with Luther Burden returning to practice with the pads now coming on. Some bad news along the defensive line where rookie Shemar Turner could miss some extended time, and the newest free agent addition, Tanoh Kpassagnon, goes to the locker room with an injury. And those two guys are going to be counted on for key roles in this defensive line, and if they're not as ready to roll as they need them to be, that's going to change who sticks and who doesn't on this 53-man roster. And we'll also have to talk about who is emerging as this year's training camp hero, the unknown guy that no one knew coming into camp, but is emerging as the playmaker that everyone is going to be rooting for all throughout the preseason. But let's start with the players missing in action here. On the defensive line, Shemar Turner and Tanoh Kpassagnon. Both of these guys are key members, and if they're missing extended time, that's going to change who actually sticks on this 53-man roster. It could lead to potential free agent additions, or guys that you thought might be on the bubble end up getting to stick around anyway. So the bigger one is obviously rookie second-round pick Shemar Turner, someone who we were expecting to be a big part of the rotation at defensive tackle with Gervon Dexter and Grady Jarrett and Andrew Billings. But on the first day of Bears training camp practice, he went down with an injury. We didn't really know what the extent was, but now the Chicago Tribune is reporting that Shemar Turner could miss as much as 4 weeks with the injury that he suffered. And that's really going to throw a wrench into any expectations we should have for his rookie season, especially on the defensive line. But for any rookie, if you're going to miss most, if not all, that's pretty much all of training camp. Depends on when you guess if it's truly a full 4 weeks or exactly what you start the date by. But if he's not back until the end of August, that's all of training camp out the window for him. He's going to be playing from behind and playing catch up really from the start of the regular season. And then as a result, we should expect very little from Shemar Turner. That's not to say nothing, but we should certainly lower our expectations. We kind of saw it last year with to some extent, Karan Amagaji as a third-round pick missing all of training camp. This is the time when players do the most individual learning, development, and growth. Because once you get into the regular season, all week you're focused on winning the next game and game planning for the next opponent. You're not as focused on, well, how can we improve your technique on this move? Or how can we get your pad level lower here? I mean, those are running, ongoing goals, right? You're not ignoring those types of things, but there's a lot less focus and intentionality on those being the priority. They take a back seat to the week-to-week stuff. And so the players that don't get to participate in training camp don't get that kind of growth and development that their teammates are getting, and so they're end up behind other players, especially then in your rookie season when you're trying to learn a new league and a new level of play and trying to get used to opposing NFL offensive lines and trying to learn from Gervon Dexter and veterans like Grady Jarrett and Andrew Billings. Turner is going to miss so much in those 4 weeks. And you add on top of that then that he plays a position in defensive tackle that is consistently arguably the hardest position to transition from college to the NFL. That is a spot where we consistently almost always see rookies start slow You don't see a lot of breakout rookie defensive tackles. Not that there aren't exceptions, but it always takes defensive tackles in particular 2, 3, 4 years before they really start to come into their own in the NFL. And so it's critical to be healthy and on the field in those times. That's something that I think we saw Zach Pickens, when he's been in and out with injuries over time, has been part of the problem for him and why he hasn't taken steps as much. Dexter has been a little bit healthier and been out there a little bit more and gotten more opportunities and grown more and faster. It's funny how that works. But if Shemar Turner is now going from someone who we thought would be a key part of this defensive tackle rotation, someone who maybe we shouldn't count on being ready for a significant role on this defensive line, well, then all of a sudden somebody like Zach Pickens has a much clearer spot to staying on this 53-man roster. Like, obviously, Turner's going to make the 53. So, like, you've got 4 guys for sure in Jarrett, Billings, Dexter, Turner. But there was some thought that, hey, maybe if Turner is good enough, could they cut Zach Pickens even this early into his career? I personally wouldn't. I think there's still potential in Zach Pickens to keep sticking around with and developing. It takes defensive tackles a long time, and he's only entering year 3, and he's dealt with some injuries. Like, I think there's a lot of reason to still hold on to Pickens. But if they were thinking about keeping only 4, well, now you definitely got to keep 5 if Turner's not going to be ready to go. And if they were already thinking about keeping 5, do you start to have to maybe keep 6 because you just know Turner's not going to be a big part of the rotation? 6 defensive tackles seems like a lot, but someone like Chris Williams, who they traded for last training camp right at the end of the preseason, has a lot of upside and has made some flashy plays at training camp. And now you're even thinner at defensive end with Tanoh Kpassagnon leaving practice with some sort of hand or wrist injury. And at this point, we don't know the extent of it, but I wanted to at least rope him into this defensive line injury conversation. Now, they used the cart to bring him to the locker room, but that's because they just wanted to save the long walk. It was a hand injury. It wasn't like he was unable to get to the locker room. So people say carted off. It's kind of that blows out of proportion a little bit more. He could just be a sprained wrist and he's back in a couple days. We don't know. But like Tanoh Kpassagnon, a defensive end, was brought in to be that new number 3 pass rusher behind Montez Sweat and Dio Odangbo, an upgrade, more experience than Austin Booker and Dominic Robinson. And if you're Ryan Poles, you're sure hoping it's a real short-term injury and not going to become anything more than that, because otherwise I'd be turning my attention back to free agency and seeing, all right, well, who else can I bring in? Like if Kpassagnon is going to miss, a couple weeks or a month of training camp or whatever it might be, like I want somebody else in there. I still, even with Kpassagnon, want someone else in there. I don't think the Bears are going to double up unless he's injured, but guys like Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, Matthew Judon, even, a bigger name like Jadeveon Clowney is out there. I don't think they're going to go that big at the position, but like there are options still in free agency to upgrade the pass rush. And if Kpassagnon's injury is going to be a part of that equation, like go out and get somebody else. Because we had talked about, could they have Gervon Dexter play some defensive end? Shemar Turner's played defensive end. Could they have some positional versatility there? But now that you've got injuries at defensive tackle, you're going to need your other tackles to play more tackles and less opportunity to play end. And so now if you want to play any of your ends in a tackle, you're going to need even more defensive ends. And so I just think both these injuries, as they go on, could have a really significant impact on this final 53-man roster on the defensive line and maybe necessitate additional moves or guys making this roster that maybe initially on paper we didn't think would end up being a part of this final 53. So we'll keep pretty close tabs on Kpassagnon, especially since we know Turner's going to be out a little bit longer, to keep tabs on who's going to be back and what that rotation might end up looking like for the regular season. At least we got good injury news at the wide receiver position with Luther Burden coming back and making his Bears practice debut. So we'll check in on where he fits in the wide receiver conversation and where things go from here for him next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Gametime. We've all been there. You log on early and wait forever to try and get concert tickets, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. I think live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping, and that's where Gametime comes in. I have the Gametime app on my phone, and I use it all the time to get concert tickets faster and easier than anywhere else. I just used it recently when tickets went on sale for Paul McCartney's U.S. tour. Really wanted to go, but couldn't get any through the main ticket buying process. That's okay. I still circled around and got them back through on Gametime, where you can save a bunch of money with their lowest price guarantee. You're not going to have any hidden fees, and they've got cancellation protection and so much more. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So while they're losing a couple of defensive linemen, Chicago Bears got one of their key wide receivers back at practice on Monday in Luther Burden, coming back when the pads go on. And to me, like, this feels like, I don't want to say the last minute or perfect timing, but it's really good timing for Burden and can help ease a lot of the concerns we had about his absence, with a caveat here that I think there's still lingering, not even lingering concern, but I think we still got to keep an eye on this one just in case as things move forward. So, like, yes, Luther Burden missed the first, week-ish, a little less than a week of practices so far with the soft tissue injury he was recovering from. And obviously that was a concern. And the more time he misses, the further behind he'll be, the more he has to catch up. And so getting back out there on Monday is a great update, a great first step towards him being able to play a significant role in this Bears offense. Now, one day back at practice is not full go, full speed. There's still a ramping up portion. He's not out there doing all the team drills with the ones in a full capacity there, but at least he's trending in the right direction and getting closer to a full participant once again. And like, now that the pads are on, like, this is the really most important time. Like, yes, especially at the receiver position, the practices without pads are still very valuable. You're still running routes without pads. You're still working on timing without pads. Defenders can still cover you without, they're not supposed to be allowed to really, grab you or contact you in ways that you would need pads for. So he was certainly missing, like, the practices he was missing were more valuable for him than, say, like an offensive or defensive lineman who, without pads, there's not a lot happening there. So, like, Braxton Jones wasn't missing a ton when he's ramping up to start training camp. But Burden's missing a little bit more without pads, but now that the pads on, now it's like real full practice. And he's at least back for these practices that have the most possible substance and meaning and value for him. And that slots him in back into this wide receiver conversation where, again, we talk about kind of shaping the Bears 53-man roster and how many receivers you keep. Like, if Burden had missed a lot of time, maybe you feel like you have to keep a seventh wide receiver or an extra one, whatever. If they were planning on keeping 5, maybe a slower than regular Burden would make you keep 6. Or if you plan on keeping 6, maybe you have to keep a 7th at first. But assuming Burden is 100% good to go and doesn't have any setbacks, which is a really big assumption we'll talk about in a second, that gives you a lot of clarity at the receiver position where you can look at it and say, all right, yep, DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, Luther Burden, Olamide Zaccheaus, those are your top 4 for sure. Devin Duvernay is probably your 5 as a kick returner, special teams guy, and then Tyler Scott's probably your 6, who can also play some special teams and maybe occasionally fill in on offense. You got guys like Miles Boykin or Maurice Alexander who have some different experiences in the NFL and with Ben Johnson that are certainly going to have every opportunity to try and unseat those 6. But with everyone healthy now, that's a pretty easy to pencil in position group on your Bears 53-man roster projection. Like, it feels like it's pretty solidly those 6 right now, and it's going to take a lot to unseat any of those 6 or an injury, where if Burden had been missing time, maybe you're like, well, he's not going to be able to do as much on offense, so we got to keep one more guy here just to give us some more depth as Burden gets up to speed, and then maybe put that guy back on the practice squad afterwards. But semi-crisis mostly averted. And I say mostly only because I'm always very leery. Is leery a word? Leery of leery of soft tissue injuries like this, especially ones that kept a player out for so long. Again, we don't know the specifics of the injury. None of us are, well, I'm not a medical professional. Maybe you are, but most of us are not medical professionals. So you can't you don't want to get carried away with any kind of medical speculation. But generally, in my experience seeing soft tissue injuries in football players, it's the kind of thing that can sometimes linger or can sometimes pop back up or sometimes never quite fully goes away, but just gets to a point where it's tolerable enough that you can work through it. And so I do want to see Luther Burden like continually string these together, right? Not just, oh, we're back one day and then, oh, that same muscle or tissue or whatever he's dealing with is sore again tomorrow. So he's back out and we're doing this on again, off again, in and out, back and forth of practice for another couple weeks. And it's still just like, well, he's still missing a lot and never quite gets back up to full speed more and more time. Because like, it's not like practicing is making the injury better. I mean, movement is a part of recovery, but you're not necessarily healing by practicing. You're healing around practice and then hoping that you don't tweak anything in practice. So I just want to, I just always have caution. I think the longer we go with Burden being out there and participating, the less and less and less concern I'll have for a potential re-injury or any kind of lingering effects there. But like at the same time, 1 day back in pads to me is not, all right, check, problem solved, good to go. All concerns are 100% alleviated. It's a big step. It's a big important step. It gives you a lot more confidence in him being back and him being him still getting to be a big part of this Chicago Bears offense this season. But I'm not at 0% either. Like I've been struggling with the language on this. Like, am I concerned about Luther Burden? No. But like, am I 100% confident that everything is totally in the clear? No, not that either, right? So like if this is some kind of spectrum between completely worried and no worries at all, like he's, somewhere in that first third, like on sort of the scale there. So like it's good. It's encouraging, it's progress, and it shapes their wide receiver room a little bit more clearly, but we will be watching that one closely as well. Just like we're watching when guys come back, we're also watching to see if guys stay in once they are back. The same will be true for guys like Tanoh Kpassagnon and eventually Shemar Turner when they return from injuries. Like, all right, are you good to go, or are you just good enough? You're good enough to be there, but are you clear? Are you 100%, or are you still going to be battling this for a while and it's going to impact your play beyond just, keeping you off the field? But now you're on the field, but not the same version of yourself. And I suppose throughout all this conversation, there is one dark horse wide receiver who is emerging as the guy that the fan base is going to be pulling for to make the 53-man roster. And he's got a real shot. I don't think his chances are zero, but at the same time, we have seen this training camp hero story before, and we do usually know how it's most likely to end. And so I want to check in on the early training camp breakout star, a current undrafted rookie free agent, J.P. Richardson from TCU, next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back, so fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. And it's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. I play fantasy football through Yahoo Fantasy. A lot of our Locked On Podcast Network hosts are getting together in a Yahoo Fantasy League, and you should play too, whether you're a first-timer or a fantasy veteran making your 1 millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins on August 4th, so stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. Every year, there's one guy at training camp that emerges, makes a bunch of good plays, and is easy to root for. Everyone gets behind him, and we're all pulling for this player to make the 53-man roster. It's one of the funnest parts of training camp, and we've found our early candidate this year in wide receiver J.P. Richardson from TCU. And I'm never going to be here to, be the wet blanket and tell you not to fall in love with J.P. Richardson. But I also want to make sure that we don't get carried away and that we remember this story ends similarly every time. So J.P. Richardson from the start has been making impressive, difficult catches. And it's not as though this is some big-bodied wide receiver who is just boxing out their opponents and using his huge frame to make these plays. He's listed on their roster at 5'11", 192 pounds. This is not a big-body person. He's the shifty, smaller, and this is always language we use to describe small white wide receivers, right? But that's JP Richardson. And by all means, we should absolutely be excited about Richardson. We should celebrate every big catch he makes. We should be rooting for him. It's the ultimate underdog story that we all love. And also, we can recognize that his path to making this 53-man roster is very difficult, but not impossible, right? I'm not here to say 0% chance JP Richardson ever makes this team, so stop caring about him because you're just wasting your time. I don't believe that's the case at all. But if he's going to make this 53-man roster, it's not about the great catches he makes working with the third team offense in practice. His only way to making this 53-man roster is on special teams, because certainly he's going to be, at best, the number 6 wide receiver on the depth chart. He's essentially competing with, former 4th-round pick Tyler Scott for that number 6 spot, assuming Devin Duvernay is, I don't want to say he's locked in yet, but assuming he wins the kick returner job as the number 5 wide receiver, then it's JP Richardson against everybody else for number 6. And that's headlined by Tyler Scott, but you've got Miles Boykin and Maurice Alexander and Samori Toure and Caleb Williams' buddy John Jackson. And there's another undrafted free agent wide receiver, Ja'Day Walker, that they signed from Texas A&M. There are 12 wide receivers, I think, on this Bears 53-man roster. It's an uphill battle for JP Richardson. But if you're competing for that number 5 or 6 spot, you're not going to be playing on offense much at all. But you've got to be a core special teams player who is on the punt team covering and making tackles, on the kickoff coverage team. You're blocking on kick returns. You're blocking on punt returns. He's even in the mix as a returner competing with Devin Duvernay. And listen, Bears special teams coordinator Richard Hightower is giving him a legitimate shot. Here's how he explained what's in front of Richardson in terms of trying to make the roster on special teams.
What does he need to do to get in that mix? Because, a guy like that type of job could be something that helps him make the team.
Yeah, he's in the mix. He's on the chart just like everybody else. He'll get his opportunities. They'll come, and we discussed that at length, and excited to see what he can do because he made some plays in a league in college they played some really good people, so he made some plays.
He stood out in any ways outside of just returning? Has he been on any gunner and different duties on special teams?
Yeah, he's been working hard just like all the rest of the guys. I mean, we're getting outstanding effort right now from all of our players, but he's doing a nice job. Is it where we want it to be? No, because Ben talked to us about continuous improvement, and that's what we all trying to do as players and as coaches. So that's what we've been focused on.
Richardson was the punt returner at TCU for his final season. He did a little bit as a junior, but as a senior, he had 23 returns for 252 yards and had a big punt return touchdown, an 89-yard punt return touchdown against Kansas in their games. There is some of that ability there, but let's not get it mistaken here. He was not a guy who was a 1,000-yard receiver up and down the field at TCU. He had career high 57 catches, 733 yards his final season there, and that it's enough to make it as an undrafted free agent and get a chance at training camp to show what you can do. And so far, he's checking all the boxes and doing absolutely everything you can do. But even in the Bears kick return battle, right? He's going against a former Pro Bowl return man in Devin Duvernay, plus guys who have done it not only in the NFL, but have done it for this special teams coordinator in Tyler Scott's in the return battle. Josh Blackwell's in the return battle. Travis Homer is in the return battle. Returning guys who have worked with this staff. That's kind of one of the intricacies here. One of the neat things is Eberflus got fired, but it's the same special teams coordinator. There is continuity in that regard. Ben Johnson doesn't have any preconceived notions about Richardson versus any of the other receivers because they're all brand new to Ben Johnson. But Richardson's brand new to Richard Hightower, but Tyler Scott's not brand new to Richard Hightower. Blackwell's not brand new. I guess Devin Duvernay is, but Duvernay comes in with both a much bigger contract and a much better reputation and seen as a much more proven player. Now, I think Duvernay hasn't been as good in recent seasons. Personally, I have some doubts about Duvernay being a difference maker for the Bears back there. I mean, he'll catch it. He's not going to fumble it. And maybe that's the most valuable part, and that's all you need. But like, I'm not expecting Duvernay to have some major breakout season for the Bears on special teams either. So like, there is just enough of a plausible chance for a player like JP Richardson to make the team. Like, there's an open battle at wide receiver that he could be a part of. There are open special teams opportunities that like he has a non-zero chance. It's a low chance. I mean, we see this every year. Think about last preseason. Felt like wide receiver Colin Johnson was kind of that guy that we fell in love with during training camp and certainly in the preseason games. And Hard Knocks definitely helped and was a big part of that. You know, in previous years, you know, you can think back to guys like, well, you can go way back to guys like Dane Sanzenbacher, but we've seen a variety of these guys every year where you get to the end of camp and it's like, oh, they got to keep this guy in the roster, and then they put him on the practice squad and see what he can do, but it never really ends up materializing. And that's just a natural part of how this ends up going in the NFL. Like, it's okay to be a guy who stands out at training camp and doesn't end up making the team. Like, this is all a part of this process, and so we've gone through this enough where I'm not gonna like think Richardson. I'm not gonna put Richardson on my 53-man roster, but I'm not gonna say that he's got zero chance either. And so it's up to him to emerge, because absolutely undrafted free agents all the time, not on every team, but like across the NFL, there are going to be some undrafted free agents that win an unexpected roster spot. There's no reason that can't just be JP Richardson. It's an uphill battle. It's rare. It's the exception and not the rule. But if he keeps making spectacular catches, he's got to keep making plays on special teams, probably more importantly than that. Because at the end of the day, he's making these catches with the second and third teams, right? Like, they're very, it doesn't mean they're any less difficult to make, but they're less meaningful perhaps in terms of who he's doing it against, less replicable against, you know, Jalen Johnson versus a third string cornerback deep on the depth chart. You know, an undrafted free agent is a little bit of a different battle than a veteran that he might go up against in a real NFL game. And so like, he can only do it against the guys he's lined up against. So he just has to keep doing it against those guys, but he's got to be doing it now with the second team or with the third team, working his way up to doing it more with the second team. Maybe eventually then do it with the first team, but more than all of that, do it on special teams. Like, these preseason games are going to be huge for him. Is he chasing down and making tackles and being a well-rounded football player who blocks and tackles on special teams, as opposed to just a wide receiver who can make some nice catches, but nice catches doesn't get you the spot as the number 6 receiver in the depth chart. Nice catches are great if you're the 1, 2, or 3, but 4, 5, and 6 make the club on special teams, and that's going to be where he has to stand out above Tyler Scott and above Devin Duvernay and above everybody else on this wide receiver depth chart. It's nice because it's a little bit more of like an equal opportunity type of measurement, but it's tricky because it's not the bread and butter of playing wide receiver, and it's harder for us to tell on the outside how well a player is doing on special teams. We can see the great catches, but if he's not making the special teams plays, the great catches don't end up meaning all that much either. So, you know, we'll keep an eye on JP Richardson. I don't know if we're going to have a lot of like big podcast updates about him, maybe once we get into preseason games, but for now, he's something that's on the radar of a player to keep an eye on as a potential dark horse to make this Bears team. We'll see if any other dark horses emerge throughout training camp and the preseason, and you can be sure we'll break it all down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen today, be sure to check out our Locked On Bets podcast, where betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily baseball locks and can't miss football futures. So find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Coming back tomorrow, make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.